Well, hi, this is Jeff from the Ozark Mountains in Missouri, USA. Well, you might remember this Epson PX-8 we looked at a few months ago. We cleaned it up, recapped it, and it didn't work. I didn't make much more progress with it then, and I recently started looking at it again, and I think we're on the right track. So what we'll do is kind of recap what we did before, where we were at, what's been done since, and kind of catch up to where I am now, and then we'll see if we can actually fix it. So let's get started. Thanks to PCBWay for sponsoring this video. They not only do PCBs and flex PCBs, they also have 3D printing service, injection molding service. They do CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication. They also have a thriving maker community where you can share projects and check out what other people are doing. For your next project, head on over to PCBWay. So when we left off last time, I had kind of checked the basics, power, clock, and reset. Those were fine. The only thing I found that was a little not working right was the switch here for the memory backup battery. It was corroded inside, so I took it off, soaked it in some dilute citric acid, then flushed it out, put some contact cleaner in there. It was fine. I wound up doing the same thing with this reset switch because it wasn't working quite right all the time, and that took care of that problem. This still wasn't working. You know, all the address and data lines and things like that worked fine. As far as I could tell, everything looked like it was changing states and there was no funny looking signals. This thing has three processors, if you remember. The Z80, it has a 6303, which is a Motorola 6800 microcontroller version. It has a little ROM and RAM inside of it, and a special Epson processor here. And these four custom Epson ASIC chips kind of interface all this stuff. Does really crazy stuff like the Z80 talks to one of these guys, which talks to the DRAM. Crazy over-engineered. And I thought, well, if one of these special microcontroller type chips was bad, I would have no way of checking that. No way of really checking these custom ASICs. So I got out my PX-8, which I had had for several months, but I hadn't fixed yet. I recapped this guy all except for the display, and it worked. So I thought, well, I'll try all the socketed chips from mine into this one, which didn't make any difference. And then my PX-8 didn't work. And I thought, well, the odds that one of the chips in here that was bad that damaged mine was very remote. Started again with power clock reset on my machine and found the reset wasn't working properly. All because this little surface mount capacitor right here was acting like a resistor. So I changed that out and mine worked fine again. And then it occurred to me it would have made a lot more sense to take the socketed chips from here one at a time, put in my working machine, verify they all worked. Okay, so the chips that are socketed, that are unique, that couldn't easily be replaced except for pulling them from another PX-8, those worked. I still didn't have an idea of what was wrong with it. It's kind of hard to test. A few weeks ago, while looking for some more information, I found a link to a diagnostic ROM on GitHub. I'll put the link in the description below. The guy had found it on another website, which he linked to. Check out that website too. A lot of nice PX-8 stuff there. There was no instructions, so he disassembled it, wrote up some instructions on the GitHub page, which is really nice. So I burnt an EEPROM. I tried it in my PX-8 first, since I knew it worked. I was getting some output, but it was not right. I was trying to use the backpack adapter for the PX-8 and HX20, but this is wired for the backpack. The manual for the PX-8 shows this really goofily wired null modem cable. It's not a normal null modem cable. So I used, you might remember this from several months ago. I'll put a link to this in the description. This is just a paper I come up with that shows the RS-232 signals for DB25 and DB9 and making a null modem cable that goes from either one to either one. So then I use that to translate this to going to a DB9, and I made this guy. The first time, of course, I wired it backwards because I was thinking of a male DB9 where pin 1 starts here, whereas a female, this is pin 5. So rewired it, and it worked. So I'm going to show you what that ROM does now. All it does is test the RAM, but it is very, very useful. It did indicate there was one bad RAM chip, but just because a RAM test says the RAM is bad, the RAM may not be bad. Maybe I nicked a trace in handling the board, that type of thing. And these are quite an odd DRAM chip anyhow, so they're almost impossible to find. So we'll do some further checking, looking for signals from the chip, comparing them to other chips, and try to determine if that's really bad for trying to remove it and replace it. So let's jump into that testing, and we'll see what this diagnostic ROM does. Okay, we've got our board set up here. I went ahead and put a dip clip on the IC that the test program is saying is bad, just to save some time. And you'll see the test program, it uses this serial connection. You can see just here with the cable I made. So I'll plug the main battery in. The memory backup battery is turned off. It started the cassette motor spinning. It's the first time that's happened. Then I hit the initial reset, and you see it does the splash screen sort of thing for the test code, and it'll take a little bit here to come up with the first test result. There we go. And it's showing us that bit 2 is bad. And it'll keep running this test over and over and over as long as you let it, until you turn the power switch off here. And it'll give you a list of the suspicious RAM locations. Now, I didn't delve into the disassembled code to see what sort of test this is doing. We'll have a look at the suspected IC compared to the other RAMs to see if we see anything. And I am going to start this test again so we have all the pins on the RAMs twiddling in some sort of known order. And then I'll get you pointed at the oscilloscope. I did print out the pages from the manual that have to do with the generic RAM waveform diagrams. And it also has the pinout of these RAMs. These are an unusual dynamic RAM as they have a built-in low power self-refresh, which is how they can use them even when the main system's off. So we'll check the signals on these pins and see what we see and compare that to the other RAMs. So I'm on pin 1 of the RAM, which is the refresh signal that comes from one of the custom ASICs. That looks okay. Now pin 2 is data in, and it is the same as pin 14, which is data out. They're tied together. Many DRAMs did that. And you see that looks kind of wonky, for lack of a better description. A lot of stuff on the bus and things turning on and off, but it really gets kind of hectic there. It never really cleans up well. And if we compare that to pin 2 of another chip, Yeah, that one I think looks a little better. It still has some of the hash and everything, but we get regular square waves and regular lows, things like that. And if we look at pin 3 on our suspect chip, this is the write enable, and this will go low as it's writing to the chip. That looks fine. Pin 4 is RAS, that's row address select. And again, I'll have to wait till it's writing to this particular chip. That looks okay. Pin 5 is address 0, 6 address 1, 7 is address 2. I have to wait till it starts talking again. Yep. 8 is power. Yes, that's 5 volts. 9 through 13 is A3 through 7. 9, we'll wait till it starts talking or communicating with the chip. 10, 11, 12. I'll have to wait. Oh, we saw that. 12 was okay, so we'll go to 13. We'll wait till it starts talking again. And that looks okay. And 14 again is data out, which is tied to data in. That still looks kind of odd to me. To do this properly, you would have to set up a logic analyzer to try to capture all the waveforms and look at things at the right time. But that just looks not quite right. And 15 is CAS, which is column address strobe. To save pins on these dynamic RAM chips back then, you give it the address in a row and then a column. And that specifies one particular bit within the chip. And then the last pin 16 is ground. So it does look like that chip might be bad. It acts a little different on the data in, data out pins that are tied together than the other chips. I'll pick another one. This is chip number 4D, pin 2. That looks kind of similar, but not as bad. So we'll go ahead and try to pull the suspect chip out. Okay, now I'm going to need to get the circuit board disconnected so we can get this chip out. It's kind of a somewhat inconvenient board to work on, because it's really hard to try to test it without everything hooked up. Okay, keyboard. Oh, the Diagnostic ROM also turns on the 3 red LEDs on the top of the keyboard. Okay, so we've got all that jazz disconnected, and there's just a few screws. I'll take those out and we'll start pulling that chip. Oh, silly me. What was I thinking? You got to take this cover off to disconnect the LCD cable. And then you've got the LCD switch and the little spring. Lift up the latch and pull up the little paper clip thingy. Okay. Now, there we go. Now we got the board out. That's better. I marked the top of the chip here. It's the second one from the right on the bottom, which is this one right here. And I'll confirm that, yes. Right there. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is add a little solder to all these pins and try to straighten them up a bit. Oops, wrong chip, Jeffrey. That worked a little better. Okay. Got the right tip in the gun. And I always like making sure the tip's clean before I start. Just a straightened out paper clip shoved in there. Let's see if it wants to come out of there. Oh. It's going pretty easy. But you remember, this is one of those odd NEC D4265C oddball DRAM chips. And I couldn't find one on eBay or AliExpress or anywhere. I was chatting with a friend of mine and he says, hey, they use the same ones on the expansion boards. And this is the modem and RAM expansion that came with my friend's board here, and he wasn't too concerned about this, so I'm going to steal one of the RAM chips out of here and we'll pop a socket in there, then we'll come back and test it. Okay, got a socket and donor chip in from the expansion unit. Got our serial cable hooked up here. You can see the terminal window there, so we can see the result that's dumped over the serial port. So we will do battery, power switch, initial reset, and we've got the splash screen. Hey, look at that, there's no X's. So all 8 bits are testing out okay. We'll let it run through a couple more test cycles and make sure that repeats. Okay, there we go. Okay. And it says the RAM test is okay. So I will get everything hooked up here, and we will connect the LCD and see if it boots up all the way. Okay, we've got the battery in it. We'll turn the power on. Nothing on the LCD yet. We'll probably need to press the little blue reset switch on the bottom. Hey, the tape drive did something and it said initializing. Yes, it shows us the 2 ROMs that are in there, calc and schedule. So if I hit return, it should start the calc program. Portable calc. All right. There we get a portable CPM spreadsheet in the 1980s. How about that? Okay, we did hear the cassette deck come to life. There's a lot of testing we need to do on that. So, you have to install a blank microcassette and format it. It's got utilities to do that. I have to remember how to do that. And then we'll come back and I'll show you how it all operates. Well, the PX-8 seems to be working pretty well, except for the cassette deck. It moves the tape just fine. It seems to have a little trouble with the head and pinch roller load and unload. It's gotten stuck a couple times, not retracting it all the way, so you can't eject the tape. And I was thinking I would swap this deck with the one on my PX-8, which has a small problem but works. And the same friend I was talking to about the RAM chip said, maybe it's just a mechanical problem. If the grease in here is kind of old and dried up, it might be trying to move but getting stuck. And I thought, well, that's a good idea. It's nice having somebody to bounce ideas off of. So we need to take the board loose here to get to that, because there is a screw I'll show you here on this new old stock unit, which is about 9% similar. There's a screw here, and there is a screw here. In order to get to it on this one, we need to take the board loose. There's 3 screws. There's a load of soldered wires here, but they have some slack. And remember, there's a switch, which is part of the mechanism, but it's soldered to the board here. So we'll take these screws loose, heat that joint up as we pull the board up, and just slide the board over so we can get to that one screw. Let me go ahead and get the tape out of there, and we'll get this taken apart and see if it looks okay mechanically, and grease it and everything like that. Years ago, I had one of these that there is a nub on the bottom of the pinch roller arm that connects into a slot on this arm, which swings in and out, and that nub was broken, so I actually machined a new one out of a little tiny screw and drilled and tapped a hole in here. Anyhow, I'll link to that video below. That was quite the deal. Okay, I've got my JIS screwdriver set out. Japanese industrial standard. They look like Phillips, but they're ever so slightly different. So get these screws out. There we go. It's much easier than trying to suck the solder out. Just lift it and then remove the solder. Okay, now we can set our board up like this. These screws are probably pretty tight. Okay, there we go. That one's loose. Now here we have contacts, which goes to the brown wires, which is for this switch right here. And I would really rather not remove that, but it is attached to this, and I don't want to break the wires or break the switch. So we'll set him out of the way. Okay. I'm going to hold that motor in place. I'll undo these 2 screws. Now there, it just moved forward when I undid this bottom screw. And this one's probably going to come up because there's a spring underneath it. Okay. The spring and the pin. And our motor comes off like that. Okay, this arm moves freely. This feels like it swings freely. Okay. We've got a little detent ball here. Which had some grease on it. That looks okay. This little pin here actually sits on that detent ball, and the spring goes over it like that. So I'm just going to take a dry Q-tip, mop up any grease that's in that hole. In that hole, this cam lobe rotates. So the motor has a worm gear, drives this, cam lobe rotates, and that's what moves this arm in and out. And this gear looks fine. The grease is kind of dry. I don't know if that's dry enough to cause a problem, but it's not going to hurt to refresh it. Get rid of that little bit of grease right there. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to put a little on this cam lobe. We can mop up the excess. A little on the worm gear. And I'll just rotate it around and kind of work it in. I'll try to get this rotated so the flat part of the cam is toward the worm gear. Is that correct? Yeah, that way it won't be pressing on the cam follower, which is that bump right there. So we should have less pressure trying to put it back together. Tiny bit more grease on that detent ball. Okay. And just a whisper of it right there. I'm going to dab up some of this extra. Okay, so we get our motor rotated like this. Well, this is a bit tricky. Yeah, okay, I have to do that a different way. Okay, so I'll do this. We'll do that. Got our spring. A little foot there. Okay. We want to get that foot on the detent ball. Start that screw. Okay. And then this screw. Make sure those are snug. Okay. Now, this switch sits in a little pocket here. So it should be self-aligning. Yeah, there's not a lot of movement there. Okay. And I'm just going to set the board back on here, start the screws, and then we can rotate that mechanism by hand and make sure it's moving as it should. Okay, so right now the head and the pinch roller are forward, and rotate this the other way. And the switch here is open. And you can see how big a gap there is right here. So I'm putting the screwdriver on the bottom of the worm gear and carefully rotating it upwards. You can see as I rotate it, this is coming down. This arm is swinging this way. The head and the pinch roller are coming back. And about there, the switch is closed. So we should be able to pop that up now. And yes, okay. That is working again. Okay, and we got to solder that switch up there. And I also did ohm out all the wires on that flex cable, and they are fine. Okie dokie. Now I'll get this put back in the PX-8 and we'll see if it works. One thing I found out here is that if you take the board loose and take off the keyboard ribbon cable and this ribbon cable, the LCD ribbon cable's still here, but we don't need to move that very much. You can just lift the board kind of like this, slip it up and back. And of course my air conditioner is turning on, but anyhow, you can slip the cassette deck in and out like this without having to take the LCD loose. So I'll get that put in there and hooked up and we'll try it. Okay, we got booted up. I've got my basic and utility ROMs in here. The earlier machines, which this and mine seem to be, don't have config built into the main ROM, so you can't set the time and date and everything unless you have the util ROM. So put the cassette in. We're going to go Control, Help, and then we're going to go Shift PF2, excuse me, Shift PF3, which should initialize the tape. In other words, it's going to format the directory. Okay, the tape did rewind. It moved forward a little bit more. Oh, I hit PF2 instead of PF3. So it's going to fail to mount, and I bet it'll error out. Ah, I messed this up. Huh, it did mount. Interesting. So if we do Shift PF1 and remove it. Tape remove, yes. Okay, will it eject? Yes. I'll put it back in. I'm going to do Shift PF3 this time. Tape drive in it, yes. It rewinds it all the way. I know you can't see the tape, but you should probably be able to see the record LED when it comes on, right there. It's where it should be writing the directory header. So when you add a program, it'll add the directory's position on the tape to the directory header. So rather than a dumb tape drive, it's acting like a real, storage peripheral. Okay, and then if we do Shift PF1 to remove it, remove tape, yes. Okay, can we eject it? Yes. Now let's see, I've got my dad's old micro cassette deck here. Come on, go in there. There we go. Rewind. Okay, stop. I'm just going to play this to see if it recorded anything. Well, that's rather annoying. It did record something. Eject it. And now, if it can read what's on the tape, we should be able to remount it. So Shift PF2. I tried to rewind it. Now it's fast forwarding past any header that's on there. And now it's trying to read the tape header. And it did mount the tape. Wow. So now, if we go escape, we're going to go into basic. Okay, I'm going to go space to select P1. Type in 10. Everybody's favorite test program. Okay, now I'm going to go save. H is the tape drive. We will call it Hey. Looks like it rewound the tape. Now it's moving fast with record on. Records off, records back on. Yeah, so it takes a while because it's, recording the header on the tape. It's finding the place on the tape to save it, that type of thing. Okay, they also had disk drives you could get for these, and there's a backpack interface for it now too. So now, if we go back to menu and go down to P2, we should be able to do load quotes H colon, oops, colon is non-shifted on this one. Hey, quotes. It's playing the tape. Perhaps it's looking for the header. Ah, it said okay. Okay, what happens if we list now? Did it load it? It did. Woohoo! That's pretty exciting. I really thought there was going to be something, electrically wrong with that tape deck, and my buddy was right. Just needed to grease it up a little bit. Excellent. Oh, that's a big relief. This guy has been a challenge. Now, I need to put it back in the case. It's just kind of sitting here as the bottom half only. So I'll get it put back in the case and test it some more, but I think we've got it going now finally. Well, this tape deck is working fine now, but it wasn't because it needed greased. After I got this all assembled, I tried the tape again, and it would kind of work, and then it wouldn't, and then it would, and then it wouldn't. That's this tape right here. I had bulk erased it. I tried both sides, and it still wasn't reliable. So I got a different micro cassette out, popped it in there, initialized it, load and save and remove it and remount it, and it was fine. I was even able to take this tape and put it in my PX-8 and mount it and load the files off of there. So it was just a combination of me not thinking about it right and picking up a bad tape to start with. I mean, it was recording something to the tape, but this tape must be worn out enough. It's just not working well for this purpose. And as you can see, I did stick this back down. We had to remove this to open up the LCD. This is great stuff for that. It's catalog number 136. That's probably not in focus there, but just put one strip along the back there, cut out the window for the contrast with an X-Acto knife, stuck it on there, and that'll work great. So a few challenges with this HX20. A little bit of corrosion repair to do there. And then figuring out that it was just that one bad RAM chip that was keeping it from booting. Luckily, somebody had written that RAM test and somebody else figured out how to use it and put that all online. So that helped out a lot. Then we had a little bit of trouble because of that wonky tape. Now it's working. I can send this back to my friend, and he's real thrilled to be getting it back because I've had it for months. So, anyhow, if you have any questions or comments, just leave them in the comment section down there below. I would love to hear from you. Thanks to everyone who helps support the Hey Birt channel through Patreon and other means. I really do appreciate it. There's some information in the description about that. And until next time, bye.